Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be making a jar with some triple start threads. And what I mean by triple start threads is that instead of one long thread where the jar the lid of the jar has to screw on a very specific way, only that one way, there's going to be three threads. So the jar can make contact with those threads. I'm sorry, the lid can make contact with those threads quicker and easier, and it actually takes less rotations of the lid to fully seat onto the jar. So I'm going to show you how I do this. Now, you can do this probably many ways as far as like measurements go and sizes go, but I hope to show you some basic tricks or the basic way to do it, and then you can kind of modify it however you want. And you could make this a double thread or a quadruple thread. You could probably change it in a bunch of different ways. So let's start by making a basic jar. And I've showed this before, but I'll do it. I'll kind of go through it quickly, and this way it's kind of easier than what I've shown in the previous video. So start with a cylinder and click this bottom plane. Again, you can make this any size you want. I'm going to make it 75 millimeter diameter, and we're going to go up 60 millimeters and hit OK. So this will be the body of the jar, and we're going to do the thread portion. So let's make another cylinder. So instead of clicking on one of these planes, we're going to click on the top of the jar, click the center, and since this is 75, I want a 3 millimeter spacing here between the outside of the jar and the threads. So this will be 69. Hit OK, and we'll go up. Let's see. Let's go up 10. And we don't want this to be a new body, the second cylinder. I just want to connect it to the previous cylinder. So I'll hit join and hit OK. And you can see when we go over to bodies here, now it's just one solid body. So we can go ahead and hollow this out. And to do that, we use the shell command or the shell tool. So we'll click the top of this jar. We'll click shell and we'll hit 2 millimeters because that's how thick I want the walls to be. You can see that hollowed out that jar nicely. And hit OK. And I'm going to do a little section analysis here. So to do this, you hit inspect, section analysis, click this front plane here, and then you can hit this flip button to flip it around. And we got to clean up this inside a little bit since this will be 3D printed. I'm going to put a chamfer on these lines here. So to click or to select more than one line, I'll click off it to deselect it. You hold shift. So you can click while you're holding shift, shift click again, and now you have these two lines. And I'll do 3 millimeter chamfer and hit OK. Now the purpose of this chamfer below is just to strengthen this corner. When you 3D print this, this will make this connection between horizontal and vertical walls much stronger. And this chamfer is because when this was straight across at a horizontal line, there's a big overhang there. So the 3D printer would have problems printing that without some sort of support. So that fixes that issue. So we can turn analysis off. So when you make an analysis, there's a little tab over here, and you can make multiple different analyses, and you can turn them on and off. We're just going to stick with that one. So I'll turn it off for now. And now we'll make the lid. So if you remember, we made this 10 millimeters high. So let's make another cylinder for the lid. And we're going to click on this plane because that's where we want our lid to start. Click again in the center and drag out. And we don't want this to cut away from what's there. So we're going to do a new body. And this needs to be at least 12 millimeters tall because this is 10 millimeters tall, the threaded part, and we need to have a wall thickness of 2 millimeters. So I'm going to make it 13 millimeters just to give us some space. So I'll hit new body because we don't want it to join or cut. Hit OK. And you can see now we have two bodies here. And I'll name these. So this will be the base. And click in here again. This will be the lid. So we can hide the base for now. And we're going to do the same shell command here. So shell, and we're going to go 2 millimeters and hit OK. So this is really important how I constructed this. No matter what size you make your jar, you want to do something similar. So especially with the way I'm going to make these threads. So we have 2 millimeters of wall thickness here, 2 millimeters of wall thickness, and then a 1 millimeter space. Remember, we made, if I had this lid, we made this space right here 3 millimeters, and now we have a lid with a 2 millimeter wall thickness. So just remember this, 1 millimeter gap here, that's important. Okay, so let's get making the threads. I'll turn my analysis off. So we're going to go to coil. And actually, before I do, let me make sure I got my measurements right. So this is 69 millimeters in diameter. Okay, so let me explain something before I do it. I want to make the height of my coil or thread. Oh, you know what? I'll explain it as I go. It'll make more sense. So I'm going to do a construction plane because I don't want to start the coil on this plane because then the thread will be running into the bottom. I could do that and that's fine, but that's just not how I'm going to do it. So I'm going to click construction offset plane, click on this, and I'm going to go up 2 millimeters and hit OK. And now you can see I made a plane 2 millimeters above this base, and that's where I'm going to start my coil. So coil tool, and first it's going to ask me what plane I want to draw on. I'm going to do the one I just made, and I have to pick the diameter, so I'm going to click the center. And now, unfortunately, because we made that plane, I can't snap to any of these lines. But we know this was 69 millimeters, and I want to make it 0.2 millimeters less. So I'm going to do 68.8. Okay, so now here are all the settings on this side for the coil. We don't want this to cut. We want a new body. So you can see it turns it into a new body. The diameter of this coil is going to be, that's the section size here, that's going to be 2 millimeters. The revolutions, I'm going to do 0.5, so I'm going to do a half revolution. And then I'm going to do the height at 6. And I'll tell you why I chose 6 height. And the height is just basically the start of the coil to the top of the coil. Now, if you remember, this section here of the thread is 10 millimeters. So I started 2 millimeters up, plus the 6 millimeters for the coil, that makes 8. And then we have another 2 millimeters on top of the coil. So it's perfectly even. So we want to make sure new body is checked. And if your settings aren't like this, I have circular on and on center. You can change this to square and triangle. You can play around with this to make different types of threads, but I find this to work really, really well for 3D printing. So I'm just going to keep it as new body and hit OK. And now you can see I've got a new body over here, which are the threads. So we're going to ease this sharp edge on both sides. So click on that circle and hit M for the move tool. And we're going to rotate 70 degrees and hit OK. And you can see how that rotated that face. And so now we're going to do the same for this side. M for move tool and rotate this 70 and hit OK. All right, and now what we want to do to make this a triple thread is pattern this around this diameter or around the threaded area. So we can click on this body. You can do that by either clicking the body of the thread, or you can come over here and click the thread body, body 3. You're going to go up to create, pattern, circular pattern, and the little window pops up. The object type is the body we already have selected right here, and then it wants to know the axis, so you click this, and we're going to choose this z-axis, but you can see the jar is in the way, and you could rotate here and select it right there, but if you want to not do that, all you have to do is click and hold over the axis, so click and hold. This pops up, and then you can go down to Z, and it selects that Z-axis for you. Now you can see it just made a ton of them. If you go over here, it did 20 of them. We only want 3. So I'll hit OK. And let me just get my thing centered here. So here's my 3 thread bodies. And now you can see I've got a triple thread. And the reason this works is because there's no gap down to the, like starting here at the rim at the top, going down to the bottom. There's no clear path to the bottom of this threaded area without running into threads. So if you're only going to do 2 threads, you have to make sure that those threads overlap each other. Otherwise, you could take the lid on and off without doing any twisting. So, okay, now we're going to join these together. We're going to make this one body. So we do that with the combine tool. And whenever you click on a tool, usually a little window pops up and you have to choose your options. So first it wants the target body. So basically the body that we're going to combine things to. So we're going to choose the jar as the target body. And then the tool body are the pieces that we're going to combine to the target body. I hope that makes sense. So we can click on these threads and watch as I click here, you'll see this number go up here. So I have 1 selected, 2 selected, I'll rotate around, and 3 selected. And there's a few options here. We're going to do join, but you can do cut, and it'll cut those bodies away from the target body. Or you can do intersect, and it'll only keep where they're both touching, which obviously we don't want. So we're going to go to operation join. Now you can choose to keep the tools. And remember, in this case, the tools are the threads. So if we clicked keep tools, it would combine this and turn it and make it all the base, but then it would keep these threads, which we don't need anymore. So we can leave that unchecked. So now you can see we only have the base body left, and these are now combined. Now, when you're making your threads, and I know I have to check this because I've done this before, you have to make sure you have enough space between threads. And I made this mistake on purpose just so you can see how to fix it. So if we go to inspect and measure, we can click on this line and this line, and we have just a little over 2 millimeters of space here. And if you remember when we made these threads, we made a 2 millimeter diameter circle, which means we have hardly any allowance here for the threads on the lid to sneak through here. So that's not going to work. So what we can do, cool thing about Fusion is you have this history down at the bottom. And this is where we made the coils. And so we can double click on these coils, and we can make changes and it will update it along this history as long as the changes don't affect anything past this feature. So I'm going to change the height to 6.5. And you can see that just lifted that up a little bit. And now I'm going to hit OK. And that does mess with my even spacing, but you know what? We can change that too, because then I can just select this face right here and hit E for extrude and go up 0.5. Now we have 2 millimeters here, 2 millimeters here. Definitely not necessary, but sometimes I'm a perfectionist. So now we can measure this space again. So we can hit the measure tool, click this line and now we have 2.339 millimeters. So we have enough space for the other threads to fit through with an allowance as well. So we can hit close. So that's good. So now we just have to remember those settings for the lid, and we're going to do the exact same thing, except the diameter of the coils will be a little different. Remember, we started the coil from the inside and went out, and we inset it by 0.2 millimeters here, and you'll understand why I did that inset of 0.2 millimeters when it all comes together. So for the lid, we have to add 0.2 millimeters. So let's do the lid, and we're going to circle around here so we're face up. And we're going to do the exact same thing we did for the base. So I'm going to do a construction plane. I'm going to go 2 millimeters off the base of it. Let's start our coil. So create coil. We're going to click on this plane. and we're gonna draw out. Oh, I'm gonna hit escape real quick because I need to figure out, I forget what diameter this is. Remember that now the coils go on the inside face. So this inside, you click on this rim and you go all the way down to the right, 71 millimeters. So we need to make it 71.2 millimeters. So let's go to coil, select this face, select the center, and we can just type in 71.2 and hit enter. And we have to go through the settings again. So remember, we want a new body. The selection size here is the diameter of the coil. Circular on center is both fine. The height, we're going to do 6.5 to match the jar, and the revolution is going to be 0.5. And here you can see that diameter, so you can make changes here with that too. So that looks good. We'll hit OK. And we'll do the same thing. We'll hit M for the M tool. Same thing we did on the jar. Base. And hit OK. Scroll over here. M again for the move tool. And grab this little rotation handle and 70 degrees. Hit OK. And now we can pattern this around. So we can click on the body or the thread. Create. Pattern. Circular pattern. The object is already selected, so we're going to click axes, and now we're kind of upside down, remember, so we're going to hit that z-axis, and it remembered my 3 for quantity, so I can hit OK. Oh, let's see, it just gave me an error. What's going on? Let's try this again. So body, create, circular pattern. The axis will be the z-axis, and we have 3. Let's hit OK. There. Not sure why I got that error before, but worked the second time. So there we have our 3 threads again. And like before, now we have to combine them. So we're going to go to the combine tool. The target body is the lid, and then the tools are the 3 threads. And there's a few ways to check that you have everything selected right? There's 4 objects here. So the lid and the 3 threads. Over here we have the target body, which is the lid, and the 3 threads. So we have everything selected. We're joining, and we're not keeping the tools. So hit OK. So now let's go back to our home view here and go turn on the base or make the base visible. And let's go back to our analysis that we had made earlier. And you can see how it's set up now. Those threads are running into each other. And that's okay. If we could leave it like this and just move this lid and print them, because we're not printing them together like this, so it would still work. But to clean up our Fusion360 model, let's rotate this lid so there's nothing touching here. So what you can do is hit M for move, and you want to make sure this free move selection is setting. There's a bunch of different options for move, but this is the one that gives you the most freedom to move it. So you're going to just, without clicking, drag to the center, and it should snap to it. And now we can use this rotation handle and rotate it. And as I'm rotating, watch the threads. See how they're moving. And now you just kind of stop at a point where nothing is touching and hit OK. So now you can see none of the threads are touching. And this is a great time to tell you why we did what we did. So hopefully you can follow along with this. Remember, we have a 1 millimeter gap here, but a 2 millimeter diameter circle, which if we put it right on the center line, it would fill this hole. This edge of the circle would be touching this edge, right? Which is why we inset this by 0.2 millimeters. So for this thread, we inset it by 0.2 millimeters on the base and then by 0.2 millimeters on the lid. And now that gives us this nice allowance between the threads in the jar. Okay, and that is pretty much it. There are your triple threads. Okay, so normally I would be done here, but I have a suggestion in the last video I did that it would be kind of nice to 3D print this, so I can show you guys how well the threads work. And so I'm going to do that right now. The problem is I don't like printing. I mean, it's fine if you do. I don't like printing plain jars like this. One, because then you can see the what do you call it? The seam line, which always looks horrible to me. So we're gonna fix that a little bit, and then we're gonna clean this jar up just a tad. So first, I'm gonna start by adding a little chamfer. So I'm gonna select both the top and bottom edge, hit chamfer, and hit. You can just type in 1 on the keyboard, and it'll give it a 1 mm chamfer. That just makes sure there's no sharp lines. And then I'm just gonna put a little pattern on the base at least. Maybe we'll just leave the lid alone for now. And that way we don't see an ugly seam. We'll kind of hide the seam. So let's do a construction line, or construction plane, I mean, and we'll do it on the front. When you do a construction plane, you pick your plane and then you can move it. So I'm going to move it just out front and hit OK. We're going to hit create sketch on this plane, and we're just going to do a very basic slot, and I'll kind of show you what this is going to look like. I'm not even going to measure this. We're just going to kind of, you know, we'll get close here. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll start at the 5th one, and we'll go 5 from the bottom. We won't count this one. We will. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We won't count that one. And we'll make a little. We'll go 8 and hit enter. Sorry, I was actually counting these squares right here because I was just eyeballing it instead of measuring it, and that's pretty dang close there. So we basically have 1 away from the top and 1 away from the bottom, not counting the chamfer. So you can see I drew that off of the jar. So I'm going to finish sketch, and now what we're going to do is emboss. So I can select the emboss command, and again that little window pops up. It wants me to select the faces, or the sketch profiles. So I'm sorry, it wants me to select the sketch profile first, which is this. Then we're going to select the face, which is the jar. And you can either emboss it, which means it's sticking out, or you can deboss it, which means it's inset. Now remember, our walls were 2 millimeters thick, so you don't want to go 2 millimeters here, but we'll go 1 millimeter and we'll call that good. So I'll hit OK, and we just embossed it onto this surface. And I don't want these hard edges, so we'll click this plane, and this time we'll do a fillet, and we'll do maybe like 5 millimeters and hit OK. And if you want to see how that will look without all these lines, you can go to this display settings, go to visual style and shaded, and now you can see kind of that nice rounded feature we made. So visual style, shaded with visible edges is what you want to be when you're designing. And there's other options. Obviously, you can do any of these, and you should play around with these down here and kind of figure out what you like seeing best as you're designing. But this is kind of the default setting, and it's what I like. So we're going to do that circular pattern again, just like we did with the threads. This time we'll be doing it a little different. So I'm going to select the emboss feature down here. Then I'm going to hold shift and click on the fillet. So now you can see the whole feature is selected, and we're going to go to create pattern, circular pattern. And now, since I already have the feature selected, you can see that it has features selected. So you want to make sure that's selected. We have 2 of them selected. We're going to click the axis, and remember, the z-axis is hidden from us here, but if you hover your mouse over it and click and hold, it'll pop up and you can click z-axis. So it's doing a quantity of 3, so let's do 20, and we'll hit OK. And now you can see, if we do that visual style again, shaded, there is our jar. So now when we 3D print this, we will only have a very small section of the seam visible. We'll have one little seam right here, and we'll have a little seam up top. And you know what? I might just keep the lid. Um, I'll just keep the lid with nothing on it. So there will be a seam on the lid, but that's okay. We're really just, that was just like a little bonus on how to do the emboss. We're really just looking to print this to see how those threads are going to work. So I will end the Fusion 360 portion right now. I will send it over to my 3D printer and get that printing, and I will show what it's like when it's done.